Did you know that there are more than 1,000 hormone disruptors living rent-free in our world? From the food we eat to the air we breathe, and even in the skincare we use. They could be messing with your hormones and making you feel like you're stuck in a mystery of your own body. And just like the plot twist in your favorite book or the most insane true crime case you've ever heard of, hormonal changes like perimenopause or menopause can strike at the most unexpected times. Suddenly, you're dealing with mood swings, sleepless nights, and all those other symptoms that make you feel like you're losing your mind. Here's the good news though. This is one mystery that you can solve with Happy Mammoth. No need for a long investigation. Just take the free 2-minute quiz from Happy Mammoth. Answer a few questions about what you're experiencing and where you're at in life, and you'll uncover the real culprit behind your hormonal symptoms. And the best part, after taking the quiz, you'll get a personalized recommendation to help you balance your hormones so you can feel like yourself again. Hormone Harmony contains science-backed herbal extracts called adaptogens. And now here's the beauty about adaptogens. They help the body adapt to any stressors, like chaotic hormonal changes that happen naturally throughout a woman's life. That's where Hormone Harmony is perfect for women of all ages who are struggling with life-disrupting symptoms such as menopause, PMS, racing thoughts and low moods, poor sleep, occasional bloating, and no desire to be in bed next to someone, if you know what I mean. Happy Mammoth is dedicated to making women's lives easier, especially moms. And that means using only science-backed ingredients that have been proven to work for women. They make no compromise when it comes to quality, and it shows. We worked out a special deal with Happy Mammoth, so for a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use code DIARIES at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code DIARIES for 15% off today. While you're out enjoying the beach, barbecues, and those lovely summer 3-day weekends, your wireless bill should be the last thing that you're worried about. And that's why you should consider making the switch to Mint Mobile. With plans starting at just $15 a month, Mint Mobile gives you premium wireless service on the nation's largest 5G network. The coverage and speed that you're used to, but with way less cost. So while your friends are sweating over their data overages and surprise charges, you'll be chillin', literally and financially. So say bye to overpriced wireless plans and jaw-dropping monthly bills and unexpected overages, because Mint Mobile is here to rescue you. All Mint Mobile plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text. Again, delivered on the largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with you too. Ditch overpriced wireless and get 3 months of premium wireless service from Mint Mobile for $15 a month. Honestly, I'm considering making the switch to Mint Mobile myself after all I have learned recently since we started working with them, and you should consider it too. It's definitely a massive price decrease from my current provider. This year, skip breaking a sweat and breaking the bank. Get your summer savings and shop premium wireless plans at mintmobile.com/diaries. That's mintmobile.com/diaries. Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, 5 GB plan required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
Test, check 1, 2. You know you need unique New York. You know you need unique New York. Does that sound all right? Ah, that's better. You can always tell something's missing when you get isolated results. Like AI that's only right for one of your systems. Get AI that can work across your data and applications. Learn more at IBM.com. The AI built for business. IBM.
Welcome back to another episode of the Murder Diaries.
As always, if you would like to listen to this episode ad-free, you can do so on patreon.com/themurderdiariespod.
Today, we're joined by a very special guest, Jake Deptula, our friend and advocate, and someone who's making a real difference in the true crime community. Jake has become a trusted voice for stalking survivors through his work on Strictly Stalking, a podcast dedicated to raising awareness about the hidden dangers of stalking and the survivors who live with it. In addition to his work in the survivor space, Jake gained invaluable insights into law enforcement and crime investigation through his experience with the FBI Citizens Academy, which has given him a unique perspective on how the system works and how it impacts cases like these.
Jake is also the creator and host of Lovelustfear, which is another podcast which delves into the complexities of relationships, human behavior, and the darker things of life that intersect with true crime. His contributions to the true crime space go beyond storytelling, though. He's working to educate, support, and advocate for those whose voices often go unheard. We're so excited to dive into all this with Jake today, his work, his journey, and his impact on the true crime world. Welcome, Jake.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Natalie and Paige, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for giving me the space and time to be able to share with you today.
Of course, you're one of our favorite friends in the community. So
Yeah, let's not pretend that we didn't just talk for a full hour before we actually recorded, which is so awesome.
And nobody gets the pre-show. It was very private, privileged information, so nobody has access to that, correct?
Correct.
Very privileged information. Super, super top secret.
So now as we're diving into this interview, will you tell us a little bit about what led you to start working in the true crime space? Was there a specific moment or event that sparked your interest?
You know, it's very interesting. I've had to go back and reach into my childhood to really understand what my motivation was for shedding light on true crime cases. And where I found basically the origin or the ground zero was the Adam Walsh case, if you're both familiar with that. Adam Walsh disappeared from a mall in Florida, Hollywood, Florida, in 1981, and was murdered by this transient that they feel did it out of tool. They don't know this for an actual fact. They haven't 100% proven these things. But John Walsh, who does America's Most Wanted and who's been a major advocate, I remember when I was a kid watching this case, I realized that the world was not a very safe place for children. And that was the first time that I ever felt that. There was an era when you could ride your bike at night, you know what I'm saying, or during the day and just go miles and miles and miles. And parents really started to pull back on the freedom that they gave their kids when it came to neighborhood, when it came to who you're talking to, you know, sort of the origin of stranger danger, things like that. So that was really something that lived in my head for a very long time. And I didn't realize that till later when I really understood what the world was like and how that your life could be turned upside down and someone could do that to you. And then you really start to feel like, okay, well, you know, your stability and safety could be compromised and you had to kind of watch out, you know, certain things. I was someone who was, you know, participated in like, you know, youth soccer, and I was a Boy Scout, and I was an altar boy, things that ultimately now we see this sort of directive of when adults have taken advantage and become predators to children. So for me, I think, you know, I was very fortunate that that never happened to me, but that really was sort of the start of understanding the true crime community. And I think I would probably say to jump to years later, decades later, in fact, where I started to become fascinated, as I think most people do in some ways, with the serial killer culture, things that, you know, ultimately sort of baptized you in the minds of why do these people do this? You know, how could you live with yourself? How could you sleep at night knowing that you create such a monstrosity of terror and pain and trauma and just horrific evil acts upon people, upon their families? And that was really probably the start of it, the psychology behind that in a very early era.
I love that you bring up America's Most Wanted. And what it really reminded me of is, as fellow 90s children, 80s babies, we really grew up in this dichotomy of Rescue 911, America's Most Wanted, and Unsolved Mysteries. But also it was come home when the streetlights come on, or come home
100%.
before the streetlights come on. But like, you know, that meant like right before. It just like really dawned on me that there was a huge dichotomy, and we were really learning through everything that was happening through 70s, 80s, and 90s, which got us to where we are today, which is like children can't really do anything without parents being anywhere. Even like first play dates, it's very common for smaller children that both sets of parents, or at least one parent each, is there at the said play date. You don't usually just like drop your kid off at a brand new house that you've never, well, you know what I mean by brand new, but a house that's new to the family. You don't just like drop them off there. Normally you're meeting up somewhere and getting used to each other first, which makes sense.
You know what's interesting though, as parents in this generation have tightened their grip on overseeing what their children are doing in person, there's a lot less control over this new access that they have through the internet. They have iPads. They have, as we talked to Rue Powell a couple years ago, how she was saying even the most basic apps that you would never expect have communication abilities.
Roblox
There are-
does. And all the kids play that. I don't know
Right,
what
and
it is,
so-
but I know they play it.
There are predators that are able to reach your children in this new created space that we didn't ever have to worry about. So while we have more updated, modern safety precautions for the day-to-day out in the real world, there's a whole new area, a whole new layer of protection that we're still learning about.
It's interesting you say that because the internet really can be a global threat to the safety of a child.
Mm-hmm.
And the access, as a kid, we didn't have to worry about things. It was very much like local threats, let's say, in-person things. Like if a parent could see you and have you in eyesight, then most likely you were going to be safe. Okay. You could look at that this way. One of the major issues we all know now with upcoming generations is that there's a lot of things that they know how to do that their parents don't know how to do. Okay. When it comes to technology, when it comes to having access to things, sharing information, and they can cultivate relationships with grown adults that you may never know about. And with that comes the coercion, the sort of things, the manipulation of a predator, which is a very dangerous thing. And to your point, you see these trends and reports on human trafficking, on things that become very seemingly remote and far away, but they're not.
Mm-mm.
They start in the communities. They start with the surveillance. They start with even posting pictures online. You always go back to this as like, there's a big debate. Do I post my kids or don't I post my kids? Well, the combination between understanding how to identify your kids is one thing. The second part is what can people do with those images, especially when it comes to AI, especially when it comes to trafficking, things like that, like recreation and using those images for nefarious things. So I think that you have to find, when you compare like past generations, these things weren't really talked about till the 80s until you had cases like the Adam Walsh case.
Mm-hmm.
Shows like Unsolved Mysteries, America's Most Wanted.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't really something that became part of the lexicon. They were usually few and far between. If you go back to even like the 70s, a lot of times you had kids that were considered runaways, right? Hitchhiking was a very popular thing to do. So there was no missing and exploited child act, right? There was no situation where it was, I believe it was, you had to wait 48 hours to report or to have police even get involved because they thought your child may have been a runaway. Can you imagine that nowadays? An 11-year-old disappears and you have to wait 48 hours before the police can do something about it?
We talk to a lot of families who have been told that false information even today. Oh, you can't report your loved one missing because it hasn't been 48 hours. So just for everyone listening, you do not have to wait 48 hours,
Shameful.
regardless of age or circumstances. You're allowed to report as soon as you know.
And this is really important to know because I think that unfortunately, when you're in the sort of the eye of crisis, you're not always thinking the most rationally. Most people don't call law enforcement when they're comfortable or they're feeling safe or they're feeling rational. And that's one of the things that even dealing with survivors, how often they get mistreated by law enforcement because they don't have all the information ready to go. You don't call 911 with a court transcript. That's what we tell people as well. You need to be in a position where you look past certain levels of trauma, of behavior, of certain things, and have people that are sensitive to understanding how to extract that information. Okay. Some law enforcement are trained in that, but there's a lot that unfortunately we've dealt with survivors that don't get that support. They don't get anywhere near that support.
I love that you bring that up because, as I mentioned in the introduction, you participated in the FBI Citizens Academy. And obviously that's influenced and informed your understanding of how crime occurs and how it's dealt with, especially in relation to the cases that you cover. So I'm curious, can you talk a little bit about the differences of how you looked at these survivors and what they went through before and how that's changed since the academy took place?
Basically, what I learned is how involved the FBI can get in certain cases. Learning that if there's extortion involved when it comes to pairing that up with a stalking scenario, the FBI is more likely to get involved in these things. It's very difficult for them to get involved in a stalking case, unless let's say a high profile situation, anything political. But for me, what I really started to grasp and understand is that we are as valuable to the FBI as they are to us. Okay, as community members, we have a responsibility to inform them, whether it's dealing with counterterrorism, crimes, identity theft, financial institution fraud, healthcare fraud, money laundering. There's a lot of things that we don't feel that we have access or we don't have anything that will help them do their jobs. And I know a lot of times people are like, well, why should I help them do their jobs? Well, part of it is if you want justice served, you do have a responsibility to contribute. Okay. Not everyone has information to contribute, but I think that when you look at it from that standpoint, what it did teach me is that these people are dependent upon us. And what I became is then a conduit between the community as a community member, then to the FBI to be able to understand what their capabilities are, what their reach is, and ultimately how they can apply what they have, their skill set to getting justice for so many of the survivors that we speak about, if that's even a possibility for them.
I love that you mentioned that because it's sparking in me something that I was talking about not long ago. But what a lot of people don't realize is like, it's not always like the movies or TV shows where law enforcement is able to be hard at work 24/7 on this particular case and that's it. It's like a lot of it depends on, say, the families. So adding this community effort to educate the community on how to be involved appropriately is so important too and can really lift some burden from the family and from law enforcement on top of aiding in any of these cases.
And to your point, Paige, they pay attention to these tip lines. You see the FBI tip lines, you see this, they really do go over these things. And it's much easier now, I think, with if you call into these numbers that they can transcribe them, through digital technology and things like that they didn't necessarily have before and they had to have somebody listen. But they do go through these messages. And we did case studies in our course where they would find this very innocuous, like needle in a haystack. And they ended up thwarting a bombing at the Santa Monica Pier during a marathon, basically. And it was a very innocuous situation where somebody had posted on Discord about needing to get supplies to build something, right? And they didn't really get into the fabric of what that was. And they ended up doing a sting. And I think it was over 90 agents were involved in basically setting up the sting, going with this person to basically build what turned out to be a fake bomb and busted him. He was a former military veteran, had suffered from delusions and a lot of other things, but he was ready. If he had found somebody to build that bomb and did that, he was ready to go. It was a nail bomb. And so it would have literally devastated so many people during this event. But these are those kind of things. It was a needle in a haystack, a very small tip amongst many. Can you imagine just pulling something like that in a way? So you find that there are ways to get things done. There are ways to sort of thwart these master disastrous plans. But I think that all of us have to really understand that they work for us and we work for them in a way. And if you want someone to provide a service, you need to give them all the capabilities to do so, either being a witness, doing things that you can do, contribute. And not everybody's in a position to do that. I completely understand that. And there's a lot of distrust when it comes to certain organizations. But I think at the same point, from a survivor standpoint, you look at this and very often they feel helpless. They feel like they don't get support because they don't get support. It really depends upon many things when you look at how the community gets involved and how law enforcement in that community is saturated with the community. Sometimes you'll get more support in a small town than you will a big city. That happens very often.
That's actually kind of mind-blowing, but when you really break it down, it's that idea of when somebody's yelling fire, they're not that likely to get help. And it's that like passer-by or whatever the phrase is, but it's like when everybody else, when you've got like a big group of people, they think everybody else is going to be the one to call.
Bystander effect.
Right. It's like the bystander effect. And I think that, I can't remember, but there's that idea too of like, if it's so serious, then people are going to be like more scared to help or not know what to do or not like, right? I think that that's what we're taught is you yell fire, not right. Literally, I think that as a woman, that's something I've been taught. I don't know. I could be so off, but I'm almost positive that I learned that.
People are less likely to get involved when they don't think they're going to have any impact on the situation. Number one. Number two is depending upon the threat and the level of danger as well. And I've seen this, and I've been on other podcasts where I've had to be in situations where I've had to defend people, let's say in public places, right? In terms of like coffee houses where a deranged person was like yelling at a customer in line, and she was getting berated by this person. And I just basically just neutralized the situation and kind of escorted them out, even, and they just basically turned their ire towards me and was able to get them out of the situation. But you find these things, and I think a lot of times people just don't want to become part of the melee. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's their safety or whether it's their whatever hesitation they have. And not everybody's in that place. I'll be fair, not everybody's in the place to do that. You really have to be smart about it when you get involved in these things. But even as a witness, let's be fair, even as a witness, you could do something and end up in witness protection, which could be a good or bad thing depending upon where you're at in your life.
One of the things, though, is if you are the witness or you happen to see something happening, you have that thought of, do I get involved? But if you were to switch shoes with the victim, you hope someone gets involved. And so there's this like catch-22 of like, if I had been in the witness or the witness's position, would I have helped? But now that I'm in the person being attacked, I wish someone would help. You know what I mean? It's always that push and pull of what would I want someone else to do for me? What am I capable of doing? I don't know. I always think about that.
I think there's that thing of not knowing if what you're viewing is really happening.
Yeah.
I think that is key. I think a lot of times we will step into situations sort of in the second act, if that makes sense. And we don't know. Like if we see something direct, like let's say somebody's getting hit or physically abused, that's a pretty strong directive to take action, whether you call the police, whether you have the capabilities to get involved, whatever your assessment is in the moment and what you're capable of doing, right? We see this a lot with dash cam videos, right? Things that happen. Like if there's an accident, generally somebody's going to get involved, meaning that someone's going to call the police, someone's going to say, hey, this is the situation. But a lot of times we especially when there's an argument, especially when there's things that are going on, you don't really know what the context of this is. You know what I'm saying? Generally, I've seen people who have defended people and been turned on by both parties in the argument. You know what I'm saying? Like I've seen that go down that way too. Even if one of the people is being abused in that context. So I really think, Paige, to your point, it's like you kind of have to understand that. And Natalie, to your point, yes, we would be in the position if we were going through this, we would want to be helped. But everybody's different, and you don't know how someone's going to assess your level of danger, even though you may be at your top level at the time.
That is really prevalent within stalking specifically. I feel like too, it's number one, it's hard to know, like, am I really being stalked? Is this real? And it's hard to prove. And it's hard to just everything around it is hard to get help because of these things. And it's why, in my opinion, there's not really a lot of great legislation around it, because how do you pinpoint it? And I think that that's why it is so important that you are shedding light on this issue with your podcast.
It's easier to prove you're being stalked now through digital technology, leaving a digital footprint.
Good point.
But a lot of times you'll have people that use anonymous accounts, nameless accounts. So finding someone who is actually doing the stalking is problematic as well. In the old days, when there was stalking, when it wasn't necessarily labeled as stalking, there was a lot of in-person things. A lot of times when it was a domestic dispute, it was seen as such. Oh, well, they really care about you, or it's a divorce gone bad, or some sort of infidelity situation. Like there were other labels for it until stalking really became something and hit the books in the early 90s from a legal standpoint. But now you have a situation where proving stalking can be very difficult. And you have stalkers who will turn the tables on the victims and basically, like DARVO them out, right? DARVO is an acronym for Deny, Attack, Reverse, Victim, and Offender. So it's a manipulation tactic, and perpetrators will use that to abuse and deflect responsibility and then end up blaming their victims. So we hear stories of this all the time in Strictly Stalking. I've also heard it in Loveless Fear the same way. When a stalker understands that they can have control over the narrative and they can basically sort of shift the blame, you'll find, Paige, to your original point, even the victims, survivors comprehending or contemplating whether they are being stalked. And that's a real problem, is the psychology behind stalking you go in with a lot of these bits and pieces of information of things that may or may not make a very coherent timeline. And you have to get law enforcement involved to say, hey, I'm going to connect all these dots. You report this to the police. Every time you report something, they have to put the pieces together. Mm-hmm. So I always say this is that the best thing you can do, no matter if you're thinking it, feeling it, it's actually happening, whatever's going on, your instinct, always put everything down. Always put everything into some form of a timeline, jot down notes, use your phone, something just to give you the indicator of feeling something's not right.
Summer is finally here, but between beach days, weekend getaways, and backyard barbecues, if you're anything like me, your to-do list isn't getting any shorter. Remember that patio set you promised to build by Memorial Day? Or the grouting tutorial you made your husband watch, but he never actually followed? Enter TaskRabbit, your secret weapon for a carefree summer. TaskRabbit connects you with skilled taskers to help with moving, mounting, furniture assembly, home repairs, and so much more. A lot of taskers are available to help even the same day. So why wait for you or your husband to do it when a tasker can do it instead? I actually used TaskRabbit recently, and I gotta say, I'm a big fan. I have these massive hedges in my backyard that were getting totally out of control. So I hopped on TaskRabbit, found a local tasker, and booked it. He showed up right on time, had all the tools, totally knew what he was doing, and in a couple of hours, the yard looked amazing. Clean, sharp lines like a pro. I was seriously impressed. The whole experience was super smooth. I'm even thinking about hiring someone through TaskRabbit to help organize my garage next. I use TaskRabbit, and I think you should too, for yard work, home projects, whatever's been sitting on your to-do list for way too long. TaskRabbit makes it easy. Tackle your to-do list today and get 15% off your first task at taskrabbit.com or on the TaskRabbit app using promo code DIARIES. That's promo code DIARIES at taskrabbit.com for 15% off your task. TaskRabbit. Book trusted help for home tasks.
It's so difficult with stalking because you kind of have to wait until they basically break the law, or there isn't that much you can do. Or correct me if I'm wrong, but you basically have to wait for them to actually break into your car or your house and obviously scare the crap out of you. And it has to escalate to a point where they are breaking the law to a point where they can be arrested. Otherwise, you're looking at maybe a restraining order or something like that, right? But that doesn't mean they're not going to walk right through it and break into your house and then finally be able to be arrested. But I think it has to escalate to a certain point, right?
Well, to your point, an RO is just a piece of paper, a restraining order, and it's really only as good as who enforces it. Mm-hmm. So to your point, if someone is breaking into your house, breaking into your car, basically confronting you physically, you're going to get a much higher response rate from law enforcement than you will, I got these comments online and it's from somebody who's not supposed to be contacting me. And obviously things are set up very differently when it comes to that. Is it a direct threat or is it sort of an indirect threat? You find that usually they're mixed together, but by the time it gets to that point, the escalation, a lot of times people don't take action. They don't report it until it becomes something that becomes a physical threat in that way. Other times, there is no physical threat whatsoever. It can be cyber. It can be attack on someone's family, on their business, on things that they have value in that the stalker wants to eliminate from their life or control. So there's a wide range of things. I mean, there are lawyers that can help you deal with these things that can basically, we've seen this where stalkers and image-based abuse happen, which is formerly known as revenge porn, right? Mm-hmm. Where people would be with someone, they'd be in, let's say, a relationship or dating an ex, and then someone uses that against them or tries to manipulate them and harass them and then end up stalking them using those things. So lawyers can get involved there, in terms of like defamation, filing civil suits. And that goes both ways because sometimes you'll have a stalker with some deep pockets and they can, kind of push the boundaries of what that is. But at the same point, you'll see a lot of justice when it comes to those things. And a lot of times, either the stalkers want to be identified or they don't want to be. But we've seen a lot of stalkers who want to be identified and almost like want to claim the devastation that they create. They really do.
You mentioned a little bit ago there were some older definitions of what was constituted as not stalking, but domestic violence or something. Mm-hmm. And so obviously as time has gone on, there's been a little bit greater understanding of what stalking is. But are there any misconceptions about it that you've come across in your work on strictly stalking?
Well, I think that's a really good question because, there's misconceptions all the time. Like everything that we deal with, there's some form of people not really understanding what stalking is until they're being stalked, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
You find people that ultimately don't really understand what the support system is like because they've had no need to reach out to that. And I think that also, too, people feel that it's a one and done thing. Once somebody takes somebody to court, once somebody gets arrested, but generally it just keeps going on and on until the stalker ends up in jail or dead. We've seen that many times where that's the only thing that will stop some of these people when it comes to that. We've had cases that have gone on 4 months. We've had ones that have gone on 4 decades. It really depends across the board where they're at in their lives and what the sort of severity of the situation is.
Hearing that, I have to wonder how you emotionally navigate these very personal, heavy stories that, you come across when working with survivors. How do you do it and have a healthy mental headspace afterward? And how do you do it and still be able to support those who are coming to you and telling their stories?
There's definitely a weight that I feel every time I hear a survivor story and every time I hear the lack of support that they're getting. And I'm in a position where I always want to do more. I always want to be able to provide things, whether that be a natural instinct that I have or just based upon the sort of threads of injustice that I feel when someone can really just take advantage or terrorize someone and really destroy their lives. And for me, I feel more empowered and I feel on a stronger mission that I see the work that I'm able to bring a contribution to and give a platform for people to feel less alone. And so for me, there's a fuel in that, there's a passion in that. And the reward of having someone say that to me, I feel less alone. I didn't know what to do until I found your podcast. It goes much further than any sort of potential residual trauma or residual weight or anything that I have and I could experience. It overcomes that in boundless ways. So to find that passion and find that mission and to find people who will really care about wanting to support and share their story, not just for their own sanity, but for others, to really want to help others feel less alone. You can't ask for anything better than that. It's really a remarkable experience, and I'm very grateful to be able to be in this position.
Would you say with your other podcast, Love, Lust, Fear, that work that you're talking about in this space and that response you've gotten from people who have been listening or have come on the show of, hey, I wouldn't have even known what to do. Would you say that you have a similar connection with the work that you've done and the topics that you cover on Love, Lust, Fear?
Well, to be fair, when it comes to the topics that we cover in Love, Lust, Fear, it's dangerous, dark, bad relationships, concerning dating scenarios, things that basically verge on bizarre, uncomfortable to dangerous scenarios. Most people have a pretty good grasp of where to turn when it comes to those things, to be fair. I mean, I think that the for lack of a better example, I think that society is really saturated with support, with things like that when it comes to that. Less so about stalking. There's some things that come up with stalking, but from my standpoint, in an origin story, I went through some toxic scenarios in relationships, and it really sort of fueled me to understand that, well, if I'm going through this and I have all the education, all the information from so many survivors, how could this happen to me? When I was like feeling this and thinking about this, and I was like, well, where did I turn? I turned to a lot of survivors. I turned to a lot of people after the fact. I was like, well, why is this happening to me if I still have all these tools, all this information? And so I realized that at the end of the day, we're all susceptible to anything love, lust, or sex. I mean, at the end of the day, those are things that businesses, lives can be turned upside down when it comes to that. And I was trying to figure out, well, what's the pull in that, even if you're dealing with something toxic? And so it was really an opportunity for me to explore and expand on some of the work that I've been doing with Strictly Stalking and my co-host Jamie Beebe that we do on the show, and do something that would be a little bit closer to home for me, being someone who has come out of toxic dating relationship scenarios.
And you really have done so much with Love, Lust, Fear. I mean, it's already, I think I can say you have two spinoffs now. You have Love, Lust, Fear, you have Love, Lust, Friday, you have Love, Lust, Law. And each one deals with that toxic relationship angle, but in its own important way. And I think that you're able to bring different perspectives and open a dialogue up for your audience.
Well, even to that point, it's one of those things where you look at survivor stories, and in my opinion, there's no more powerful way to share a story than having someone who experienced it. You really can't ask for anything better or anything stronger, in my opinion. So what I'm able to do with Strictly Stalking, by extension, Loveless Fear, is give survivors a chance to share their story in their own words. And part of the thing that I was really trying to capture, and so far people have been receptive to it with Loveless Fear, is try to remove the judgment. Give people not just the bullet points or the highlights, but understand the motivation behind why they made the decisions they made, even if you don't agree with those decisions. Because we have so many people, why didn't you get out? Why didn't you do this? How could she do this? How couldn't she do that? I'm like, listen to the story, listen to the process, listen to how they grew up, listen to what their parents were like when they grew up, listen to what their romantic tropes and the idols and the things that they looked up to influenced and went against and didn't teach them all the things that could be coming up dealing with a toxic scenario. So it does give people a better insight into that. And I think by extension with Loveless Fridays, which is the talk show version of that, and then even further, to your point, Natalie, apparently my trifecta, the Loveless Law, I'll be working with Michelle Locke, who's a former domestic violence court judge, family law attorney, getting into sort of the fabric of how the law impacts dating relationships, divorce, SADV, and ultimately, what are some of the cases that are out there you may have heard? What are some of the ones that you haven't heard? She's presided over 5,000 cases as her time on the bench. She has done countless amounts of different cases where she's defended families. She's put herself out there to really understand the dynamics of what that is. So to me, I really want to capture and give people a chance to understand the nature of a relationship and to basically be prepared. We don't get taught how to date. We don't grow up getting those things. Usually we consult things after we've been through something toxic. Isn't that unfortunate?
It's so true. And I remember hearing judgment a few moments ago. And I think that if the court of public opinion is judging them, don't you think they're judging themselves and trying to figure out
100%.
Is this as toxic as I think it is? What's normal? What's not? All of those things. Just like you said a few seconds ago, if you don't have a frame of reference, maybe it is your first real relationship, or it's not something you're born knowing how to do. And you only learn kinesthetically through experience. I remember my high school boyfriend was not the best. And at a certain point, it got to after about a year and a half or two of just not being a good thing. My mom was finally like, look, if I tell you not to date this guy, it might push you towards that. And I don't want to do that, but he isn't welcome here. So just so you know, that's what's happening. He's not welcome here. And what he's doing is not correct. What you're going through is not right. Shout out to my mom who's listening, because I think that ultimately gave me the space to be like, if my mom, whose opinion I love the most, and I am deathly afraid of disappointing ever, also my dad, if they don't like this, then why do I like it? You know, it allowed me to reflect on that. And I'm lucky that I had that, because it could have gotten drawn out for a lot longer.
Your mom played the parent card so well. I got to give props to your mom, because what she did is she didn't forbid you from connecting. She let you go down this path.
Yep.
But in what she could control, she basically gave you that boundary. And I gotta praise her for that, because most parents wouldn't do that. They would forbid the connection. And I've seen, you know what happens? I've seen this before. I've seen people run away with the significant other, end up getting pregnant and break up, and they come back. I've seen this multiple times in my own life and friends of friends. Even when I was a kid, I remember this friend of mine, his sister was seeing this guy, and her mom forbid her to see him. She basically broke out of her room, went to stay with him, ended up getting pregnant, and they didn't stay together. And so she came back, I think if she was like 17 or 18, with her baby and everything else. Like, it really became this scenario. And, you know, you set yourself up for this sort of path of rebellion in a way. It's something that unfortunately parents have to put themselves back into the role of like, why is my daughter so into this person? Why is my daughter so captivated by this person? Is it something that she's going to learn and grow out of? Or is it something that I can give her that certain level of advice and sort of give her a perspective on it? And again, I got to give prompts to your mom. That was well played.
That's exactly what I did, was offered the perspective of, boy, isn't it weird that my boyfriend's not allowed at my house? And not even in a mean way of like, he's horrific and so awful, so he's not allowed here. It's just, we don't really appreciate the way he's treating you, so he's not going to be welcome in our home any longer. And it was just like, wow, how odd, because I have older sisters and a brother whose significant others were welcome at the house. So like, why isn't mine? Oh, like it offered me that perspective that I didn't have before.
I love she didn't do it with theatrics. She didn't do it with punishment. That was smart. That was smart. That's a lesson we can all learn. I don't have kids at this point, but tell your mom that I'm going to be using that one if I need it.
Good job, Mom. And something else that's kind of coming up for me right now is that you've really made it a priority in your work to really amplify and center it around the voices of the survivors. And this is obviously something, Natalie and I have come to know through our work in true crime as well. And in the true crime community, I feel like we could always be doing more. What do you think we could be doing to continue to amplify those stories and maybe even provide more support for survivors?
To be fair, in your case, I think you're doing it. I think that you're amplifying and shedding light on crimes that some people are talking about, a lot of people are talking about, and other ones aren't talking about at all. They may not know those things. I think that from a community standpoint, I think awareness is key. And I think that also what you both do when you have the opportunity to reach out to survivors or people who are linked to the case is a gift, and be able to do that. Everybody has a different way of doing things. And I think that it's easy for us to sit here and judge, well, you could do it this way or could do it that way. I mean, I have a very strong advantage that I get to speak with survivors or families of people who have not survived in that way. And that's the format of the shows that I set up. Michelle and I will be doing things that cover cases that she's covered. So she'll have a personal connection to those, but there may be some we don't. And there may be some we have to reach out to, which is something we want to do, reach out to families or reach out to some sort of connective tissue to those cases. But I think at the end of the day, raising the awareness and the impact really is about the people, not only who listen, but the people who the case revolves around. Like I'm sure you've had that from families and people that you connect with, is you just assume if a case has made national news, they're feeling supported, they're getting support. But sadly, there's a lot of national and international news organizations that really don't spend the time amplifying their story. They amplify the bullet points. They amplify the most headline-worthy moments. And we had a guest on Strictly Stalking, and she's a very popular influencer. And we reach out to her because people have tagged us on TikTok. That's what people do occasionally. Hey, you should get on Strictly Stalking. So we reach out to her. She has a very big following. And I think it was a news outlet. And she was so disappointed because they spent 2 minutes on her segment. I think they interviewed her for like 2 hours. And it was really nothing to do with the support that she needed. It was nothing to do with the advocacy and the things that she wanted to get across in terms of her core message and her mission. And, she turned around and said, what a great experience she had with us on Strictly Stalking, and to be able to share that. And that's kind of what the deal is that we're giving people a chance to step beyond just the crime that has been committed against them. And I think that's very important to shed light on. These are people. These could be like any of us. And it's not just the things that we think we know them for. Let's pull back the curtain a little bit. Who are they? Where are they going? What kind of strength did they have to get through this? But the crime does not define them. What happened to them does not define them. It really doesn't. And I think that that's what I've been very fortunate and privileged to do, is to discover the people behind the crimes and the things that we think we know.
I think you really touched on the heart of the whole ethics conversation in the true crime space, whether that is with murder or missing persons cases or even stalking. There's this level of respect that needs to be involved in these conversations that you do so well on all of your shows.
Thank you.
I really do admire it. I think that it's something that not everyone can do. It can be learned, but there's a way that you do it that it just comes so naturally that I can feel the respect you have for your guests. And it makes me wonder, like, what is your ultimate goal that you hope to achieve through your work, both through your podcast, but like also your advocacy efforts?
That's a really good question. It's taken me years to develop a plan, let's say a strategy behind this. When I first got into podcasting, I really didn't know what I was doing. I'll be honest with you. Like when Jamie and I got together and did this, I had been working on a film for Lifetime. Oddly enough, it was called The Nanny is Watching, about a stalker nanny for this family, right? It was like a traditional Lifetime movie, and she was the casting director on it. So we started a bond on true crime. And she wanted to do a podcast. And she said, but all of them are taken. That was her MO at the time.
Mhm.
And I said, well, what about stalking? And she goes, well, I don't know anything about stalking. I said, well, neither do I, but it would be fascinating to learn. Nobody's covering stalking. So we decided to go into it. She did like a 3-day marathon of research, and we figured out a way to get into pitching it to this company. They liked it. They supported it. And then we were kind of off and running. And the first person we interviewed was Lenora Claire, who's a major advocate in the space. She's a stalking survivor herself.
We love
well over
her.
a decade. Right? She's
It's incredible.
such a great person. She's a really good friend to me, and we did the FBI Academy together. She's amazing. And so she wanted to know why we decided to pick stalking and what our invested interest in. And we said, well, we don't know a lot about stalking, but we'd like to learn. And she said, well, that was good enough for her. So she opened up the floodgates to us. She introduced us to the amazing Tara Newell. She introduced and
We
brought
also
us
love
a
her.
level of credibility, right? No, this is just
All
this
our
is
friends.
just a mutual
Yep.
admiration society here. Yeah, exactly. It's very, very clicky right now. A good click to be in, though, right? So then we got down this path, and she opened up the floodgates to give us credibility, and so we were off and running. We were speaking with survivors, giving them our opportunity to share their stories in the space, and so. What came of that is when you really get to listen to the story in the words of the survivors and the people who've experienced this, it really changes your perception on how you view things like, as I mentioned at the top of this episode, the serial killer culture. Really turn your fascination from the perpetrators into the survivors, into the victims. And so to me, those are the stories that I want to amplify. You know, all intents and purposes, I don't give a shit about the psychology behind why someone did something. I want to know how someone can survive someone who has been in a situation where they've had to fight back against someone who's perpetrating against them. And so to me, I find that giving people the amplification is one thing. The second tier to that is figuring out how to navigate them through resources. Like I've spoken to many survivors and will connect them with private investigators or lawyers or people that I can, even FBI agents, things that may give them support. It may be as simple as they feel more empowered because they have access, but it may even go further. I've had people who have connected to other people who have reached out to lawyers and hired them and gotten justice in their cases. So to me, it goes a step further in just the recording and the promotion, but it's really forming a professional bond with people to be able to say, hey, if you need my help, I'll go a step further. If I can do it, I'll do it. And I think that goes a long way because they don't have a lot of people standing up for them, especially probably in the media too, because a lot of times like you go through these stories and this and that, but I formed probably dozens of connections and with some remarkably strong and amazing people in the space that are survivors. And I've been able to at least support them and possibly assist them in giving them resources. So I think to me, that's my next level is to continue to amplify, continue to provide resources for, and to let people know that they're not alone.
I love that so much. As we end today's episode and our time with you, do you want to tell our listeners where they can stay connected with you and all of your amazing podcasts and work?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Paige. You can find me on Instagram at Jaked, Jaked 3000. You can also find Strictly Stalking on Instagram at Strictly Stalking Pod. Instagram, lovelustfear Pod. You can find pretty much everything on my link tree on that. You can email me directly, Jake at jakedeptula.com. That's Jake at JAKE. DEP as in Paul, T as in Tom, ULA.com. I want to promote YouTube for a second. I want to tell you is that both of you and you've been doing this for a while. You're doing such compelling work in the space, and you bring such a breath of fresh air and really make these stories digestible and palatable to people in a way that is a whole new sector and something that you step into. And I appreciate the level of respect and ethical and moral nature by which you approach your stories. I can tell you both care. I can tell you're both on your own mission. And it's really something that's very needed in the space. And I'm so glad and so happy that you're continuing to do such quality work.
Oh,
Well, thank you. Now I'm blushing. Do you want to come on every week?
Every week, I'm just going to be your motivational
I
speaker.
think we need that. You could be our hype man.
I've been called the ultimate hype man by, I think Lenore Claire called me that too. Yeah, but no, but it's bottom line is this: it's a reflection of what I see. I don't go into things and I'm like thinking, oh, let's figure out how to amp up somebody's day or whatever. It's just kind of like if I get a positive impact from something, I'm going to express it. I'm going to reflect it back. I don't sit there and say, well, how can I, kiss Natalie and Paige's here since they're putting me on their show. But no, in all fairness, people can get called out for that, but it really is just a reflection of that. If something moves me and if people make an impact in my life, I'm going to share it. I don't care what people think or what the motivation behind it is. That's what I'm going to do.
I think that's a great reminder. When you see something that somebody's doing that's really great, let them know.
Amen.
Make sure to follow us on all of our socials. And remember, if you want to listen ad-free, head over to patreon.com/themurderdiariespod. And until then,
Stay safe.
Bye.